All right. Good evening, everybody. We have a skeletal crew here tonight, and we're waiting for one more person. And thank you for your patience out in the hallway. Normally, we don't run over this long. We hadn't seen each other in a while, so we had a lot to discuss. I'm still calming down myself, so take some deep breaths. So we'll give Eve a moment to get back, and then we'll start. And Bob Anderson, is that you? Are you all ready with your presentation up here? Okay. Oh, you don't have, do you have slides? If you want slides, if you don't want to use them, that's fine too. We have them. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm not quite sure what happened to Eve, but I think we should start given the time. Okay, so we've already moved back, so I'm going to call this meeting back into order, and please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so we'll start tonight with announcements, and since we're still waiting on Eve, I'm going to put Dwayne on the spot. Any announcements?
None from my side.
Okay. Do you have any announcements, Jenny? Or David, any announcements? Okay. And I just have one announcement, which is I'll be holding my monthly Meet the Mayor office hours on Friday from 8:30 to 10 a.m. in the library lobby. I guess the other announcement is, in addition to our 2 normal September council meetings, we're going to be holding a special budget priorities council meeting on September 16th. That's a Monday at 7 p.m., and that will be here in this room. And are there any staff announcements? Nope. Okay. So we'll move on to the presentation. So I'd like to welcome Bob Anderson from Curb My Clutter.
It sounds off. Yeah.
You might have to press the button on the side.
Is that better? Ooh.
Not better.
Okay. So normally I take about 10 or 15, 20 minutes depending on Q&A with council because you guys typically have a pretty full agenda. So I didn't really want to go through the slides because that might take us 45 minutes, which to be respectful of your time. So my name is Bob Anderson. I've been in the solid waste industry for over 32 years. I spent my first 20 years with a company called BFI, which became Allied, which became Republic Services. And then I was with, for 12 years, I was with a company called Community Recycling, which handled all the paper bottles and cans for about 15 facilities in PA, New Jersey, Delaware, Connecticut, and New York. So about 2 years ago, I was approached to advance Curb My Clutter. And so here I am. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what we're up to. Remarkably, 85% of clothing in America today ends up in a landfill. And that's really the driver behind what we're looking to accomplish. Households are chock full of electronic materials. And most of the time, people are not inclined to get rid of some of their devices because of their concern with identity theft. So we learned from paper bottles and cans that it really takes the convenience of curbside recycling in order to drive those materials out of the waste stream. That 85% represents about 25 billion pounds a year, so it's a huge number. And the traditional methods of curbside collection aren't really effective in clothing electronics because people don't generate clothing electronics every single week. So you can't run a truck past a house every single week to collect clothing electronics. So we came up with a software package where a resident can raise their hand and say, hey, I've got some material, and then we can consolidate those routes in a very effective way in order to collect those materials. When you look at paper bottles and cans today, the value differential between clothing, electronics, and paper bottles and cans is fairly significant. I'm sure you're aware of some of the challenges that we have in recycling paper and bottles and cans today, and most municipalities are paying anywhere from $50 to $100 a ton in order to have their paper bottles and cans recycled. Contrast that against clothing electronics. Today, clothing has a value of about $600 to $700 a ton, and on average, we're yielding about $100 a ton on our electronics. So when you contrast it against what's going on with paper bottles and cans, again, the challenge goes back to how do you harvest the material? How do you get them out of the household? Our software system is text-based, so that all the resident has to do is text the word pickup, and it walks them through a registration process. And through that registration process, we ask them for images of some of the materials that they're going to recycle. Those images have several purposes. One being that we need to understand if we're deploying the right truck in order to be able to collect the materials that are on the route that day. But secondarily, you could imagine if I'm having a conversation with someone who purchases clothing or electronics, and we'll use clothing as an example, and I say, I have 40,000 pounds of clothing, what's it worth? That's one conversation. But if I have another conversation that says, I have 40,000 pounds of clothing, and I know there's 800 of X, 300 of Y, 200 of Z, now we've ripped open that bag and offered some transparency into what's actually in the stream. They can purchase that material with a high level of confidence. When we talk about recycling clothing and electronics versus donation, it's important for us as a company that if you're socially motivated to donate, then we encourage you to continue to donate. What we're really trying to impact is the 85% that's ending up in a landfill. For those people who maybe have good intentions to recycle those materials or donate them, but they never quite get there. So that's part one. Part two would be, how do we harvest those materials that are laying sequestered, those assets that are laying sequestered in the household? So most people wear about 30% of the clothing that is in their closet. We talk about aspirational clothing. It's that clothing that's going to come back into style again, or, I'm really going to fit into it one of these days. I know I'm going to get back down. So how do we encourage people to move those materials back into the circular economy? Most of the clothing recycling today is pretty linear in that if it's sold in the export market and it's sold to a third world country, what happens to that clothing after it's worn by that person? Eventually it's going to end up in a disposal stream. So we're being incubated by a firm called the Closed Loop Fund, and Closed Loop's mission is to impact post-consumer recycling. So they've got the support of a number of major brands, which include Unilever, Johnson & Johnson, Starbucks, McDonald's, Amazon, Target, Walmart. And the purpose is to try to advance post-consumer recycling. So if a company like Curb My Clutter were to go to a traditional financial market, it would be way too risky for anybody to invest in that type of activity. So Closed Loop exists in order to advance that post-consumer recycling. They're incubating Curb My Clutter partly because they made an investment in a company called Evernew, which can take clothing, can take cotton material, regenerate it back into thread so that clothing can be made into new clothing, which is where we think the future of recycling clothing needs to go to. In terms of the electronics, most people think about the TV, right? Because the TV is a problem. In public drop-offs today, about 85 to 90% of what's collected are TVs. We think partly because people are concerned about taking their personal devices and taking them to a public drop-off where they go into a pallet and they don't have the perception of being secured. So a lot of devices have personal information on it. Your laptops, your computer towers, your tablets, cell phones. In our collection system, we're finding about 50% of what we collect are the TVs, 50% are all of the other electronics. So we're actually harvesting a higher value material. And part of the reason for that is if you're really concerned about your electronics being out in the public, you can select our ring feature where we'll ring your doorbell, take the materials directly from your hand and put them into our truck. Although we're curb my clutter, we don't want any material at the curb because I can tell you that any computers or electronics left at the curb are likely not to be there by the time I get there. So we collect what I call UPS style. So we're collecting at the porch, at the garage, or we're using the ring feature. The value proposition to the municipality is that your public works director has another solution or another tool in the toolkit for handling electronics within Princeton. You get disposal avoidance. And I'm trying to recall if Princeton does collect their own trash, right? No? So it's okay. So
No, we do, but we contract out to a hauler.
Okay, so you wouldn't see any value from landfill disposal until, say, another contract would come out?
No, we do, because our contract is based on per tonnage.
Okay.
So.
And then 10% of the revenue from the materials we collect in the community come back to the community. So you're not going to balance your budget off of it, but it certainly adds additional value. What we ask in return is because most municipalities accept responsibility for trash and recycling within their community, we ask for community engagement in order to promote the program with your constituency in the same fashion that you would use in the channels that you're using today. So we're using social media, if you have a website, if you have email addresses, email blasts, your website, if you do newsletters. And we provide all of the collateral that's necessary to do that. So what we try to do is we appreciate that municipalities are all trying to do more with less. So anything that I give to the administrator would be something that can be done in a few minutes to upload it and move it online. The resident gets the convenience of curbside recycling of their clothing, electronics, and they have an opportunity to earn rewards if they, today we're doing a $10 Amazon gift card if you take pictures of some of the items that you're recycling. So if you take a certain action, you could potentially earn a reward. And then, from our perspective, we're just striving to drive as much out of the households, maybe call it an urban mining, to try to advance pulling these materials out of landfill.
Great, thank you. So, other questions?
I kind of droned
for
on there for a while. So.
Mr. Anderson? Ms. Niedergain, did you want to start?
Thank you very much. This is a really interesting proposal, and I have some questions about what happens, about how the program works, and then some questions about what happens to the materials. So my understanding is that the best thing you can do with clothing in particular is to donate it domestically rather than have it be shipped overseas. So you're saying that the clothing that you receive is remanufactured? Is that, or what? Can you tell me more about what
So
happens
it's
to
really
it?
twofold. Today, the majority of the infrastructure is clothing is sorted by sorting houses down to 400 grades of material, and then those products are either resold as secondhand clothing, or they would be remanufactured into, say, an insulation or wiper rags, or there's some other materials that are being made out of used clothing. So that's the way things exist today. And the large portion of those the clothing that would be sold and export are ultimately going to end up in the disposal, because there's not going to be any avenues for them downstream after they're done with the clothing. Where we're looking to take the industry is there's technology out there where you can take clothing today, cotton materials, what they're working with now, and they break it down into, I don't know if it goes all the way down to the molecular level, but they basically take an old pair of jeans, make thread, so that a new pair of jeans can be made out of an old pair of jeans. Now you've got truly circular.
And that's possible with today's technology? I mean, that is actually possible.
There's a company
right
called
now?
Evernew, EVNRU, that is also an investment of the Closed Loop Fund. And there's a number of companies out there that are looking at forms of chemical recycling that would break the material down. So when we talk to the major brands, they have a real concern about fiber security. They call fiber security. So in 10 years, they're not really that sure how much cotton will be available to them to actually make clothing, because cotton is so environmentally intense in order to produce. A single T-shirt can use 700 gallons of water. So the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has kind of coined the fashion industry as second to environmental impact, only behind oil and gas. So it's a problem that we're trying to solve, and part of what Curb My Clutter would do is to be the feedstock so that we could get that true circularity. But I'm not standing here today telling you that that is where we are today. That's where the vision of where we want to go.
Okay. So what happens now to clothing that you're collecting if it's not?
So the
Getting-
clothing that we collect today is sold to the same folks that are purchasing from the Goodwills or the Salvation Army or the veterans. They're all using the same pool of people. It's to generate revenue.
So
So we're using that same infrastructure that exists today.
okay. And is Curb My Clutter, are you a nonprofit, a for-profit, a
We're
startup?
a for-profit company.
For-profit.
That's why I talk
Okay.
in terms of recycling rather than
Right.
donation.
Right.
So a lot of municipalities that I talk with, because we don't discern between the quality of the material, there are donation companies that are getting a little more picky about what they'll take and what they won't take. So we can be a supplement to that. If there's a pool of clothing that you want to donate, and then there's another pool of material that you don't want to donate. So as long as it's clean and dry, it's something that we can probably work with, whether it's bedding, towels, curtains, those kind of things. So it's not just clothing.
Okay. And you talked a little bit about security for electronic disposal, which is, I'm one of those people, I have a drawer full of, my old iPads and my old phones, and I'm not quite sure how to make sure that the information on there is destroyed. So, but it doesn't sound like you're really, aside from the fact that I get to hand it directly to a driver rather than, but there's still, you're not in any way taking any steps to destroy the information on there, or is that part of your
Right.
process?
At this stage, we don't do any processing of the materials. Our goal has been to create a system that we can go to other cities across the country and say, here's how the system works, here's what we've done, and then be able to enable other folks to be able to use the same process. In terms of the electronics that are collected today in, say, Princeton, those items would go to an eSteward or R2 certified processor who would then make sure that either the hard drive is destroyed or that it would be wiped clean.
Okay, all right. And two more quick questions. What does minimize windshield time mean? I had tried
So
desperately
in
to
the
figure that
trash
out.
business, particularly when you're doing curbside collection, you're going from house to house to house. And so if you want to minimize windshield time, it's to collect the material as efficiently as
As
you can.
efficient, okay.
So we have route optimization technology into our system. So if we've got 5 or 7 stops in Princeton Borough on a given day, we push the route optimization and it tells us the most efficient sequence in order to collect
Right.
them.
Okay. And the final question is just where else at this time are you operating?
A majority of our homes are in Pennsylvania. In New Jersey, we're doing Gloucester Township, Woolwich Township, Monroe, South Harrison, Westfield. In Pennsylvania, we are getting ready to start with Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, which is 330,000 households. We do a lot of the main line. So we've got Radnor, Tredyffrin, Lower Merion, Swarthmore, Nether Providence, Easttown, that whole section on the outside of the city. We've kind of circumvented the city of Philadelphia. We haven't quite been ready to take on the city of Philadelphia. But we did recently sign a contract with the city of Allentown, so that'll be the largest urban setting that we're doing. But
Thank you very much.
Ms. Carmella, do you have any questions?
This is just kind of an indulgent question because I'm curious. And what route optimization program do you use? Is that proprietary, or can you tell us?
It's called Routific.
It's called what?
Routific.
ROUTIFIC? Something like
possibly.
that? Okay, thanks. That's all I wanted to know.
Yeah,
I'm
I mean, we just
curious.
send a API out and it comes back, and we didn't build the optimization software. We're using off the shelf.
And you might have mentioned this already, but in the presentation, it says there's a fee to collect TVs and the CRT. So what would that be?
Yeah, so in the majority of TVs collected fall under a $35 category. So that would include all of today's flat panel TVs, your LCD, your LED. We designate it really by weight. And so a TV that's under 150 pounds is $30. A TV that's over 150 pounds would be $100. And that would include the large rear projection TVs, the Sony TVs that weigh, the CRTs that weigh, 300 pounds, any wooden cabinet TV. So the standard TV weighs about 65 pounds. Most of your flat panels are significantly under 100 pounds. But there are those big monsters that are the higher value. So today, I would say 85% of the TVs we collect are in the $35 range, and then the about 15% are those big, heavy TVs.
And in terms of what you're looking for from the town, obviously it's a voluntary program for whoever would want to be in it. Are you looking for, how is it working in these other towns in Pennsylvania?
So it's the community engagement,
Okay.
which would be, to list us on your website, we would do an announcement if you have email blasts, I don't know if you collect email addresses, but send an email out that we would produce and get your approval on. We've produced newsletters, so if you do a newsletter, whether it's online or whether it's an actual paper newsletter, we could provide you with an article for your newsletter. So we believe that community is a part of the program that we're promoting. And we do have a donation feature for your rewards. So if you earn a $10 reward, but that's not $10 Amazon gift card doesn't mean much to you, but it would mean something to the library or Parks and Rec or some other organization that is central to the community. Like Woolwich does a lot of youth sports because it's a younger community that has a lot of sport activity. And there's an opportunity for those youth sports to be able to fundraise through the program where if you push your materials through Curb My Clutter, the folks who actually recycle their materials through us can donate their rewards back to that organization.
And my other question is, do you always use Amazon as the rewards?
Right now, we're using Amazon, but our intent is we've been having conversations with major brands that would be willing to participate as well. So it's not exclusively Amazon in the future, but right now it is Amazon.
Okay. Yeah, it'd be great if you're community-based to think about, is there a way to
Engage
partner
local.
with local businesses?
Right, and that's something that we would absolutely consider.
Right. Did you do a question?
It's sort of just like a philosophical question. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. Why is it your service comes through municipalities as opposed to a service that's marketed directly to consumers? It is a for-profit service. I'm just trying to figure out where does the municipality play an essential role in all this?
All right, so there's a couple things there. One, again, most municipalities accept responsibility for their recycling and trash removal in the community. Public Works directors need solutions in order to be able to provide to residents. So, a resident calls a Public Works director and says, hey, I got a TV, what do I do with it? Or calls your Public Works. And they either don't have a good answer or there's a drop-off in 6 months, which a lot of residents don't want to hear. And then they have to hear the whole conversation of, well, I pay my taxes, you should be taking care of this, So most municipalities like the program because it offers additional solutions to their residents to recycle those materials. We're also looking at some of the harder to recycle materials that would be in the stream. We offer microwave collection, and we're looking to start offering dehumidifier and air conditioner recycling. So those are items that residents don't know what to do with. And maybe there is a solution in Princeton. I didn't really dig into all the solutions of what Princeton has to offer, but most of the time residents look to the community. The first thing they do is they go to their township website to say, what do I do with this? And so we're another tool in the toolbox for your Public Works Department.
So you look to us to purchase the municipality, us being a municipality, to purchase the software?
No, there's no fee to the community. So there's the only.
I saw something here that says about licensing software to municipalities. That's what.
Well, that's in the event. So when we go to scale, like we're talking with Denver, Colorado. If Denver, Colorado collects the trash and recycling for their community, we can license the software to them so that they can then enable their trucks to be able to collect these other materials. So as major cities they're all looking for zero waste options. Clothing and electronics makes up 10% of the waste stream. You need a solution in order to be able to collect those materials. And since those materials actually have value, it can make good economic sense. So in the presentation, when we talk about licensing, we're licensing to private haulers, we're licensing to cities who want to accept the responsibility of collecting the materials. In the Philadelphia market, we're doing a turnkey offering. So we're running the trucks, we're doing all of the customer service. We're handling everything soup to nuts. And part of the reason for that investment is to be able to go to other cities across America and say, here's how we did it, here's how it works, and here's the economics in your community, and this is the tool that you can use in order to facilitate that.
Okay. Yep, Ms. Miller, and then I'd like to try to wrap it up
Yeah,
and
yeah,
move
just
on.
two more. One is like about how many, do you know what your rejection rate is? Like people might say, will you take this thing? And then you say no. Like, is that common?
Yeah, so I think the last time I looked at the statistics, 96% of people who engaged the service followed all the way through with the service. So most of the time, if somebody has something they want to get rid of because it doesn't cost them anything, with the exceptions of the TV, they're happy with moving forward with the service. So we have about 4% drop off.
Okay, so I mean, I'm just saying. So you take almost everything people want to get
No,
rid
we're
of.
well, if it's clothing, electronics, yes, but if it's your couch, no, or mattress.
Okay, and then the other thing is, I assume, I mean, it's evident that these deductions aren't going to be tax deductible. And so, I mean, I think this is a good program and I support it. But I would hope that in the communications, that's up front so people understand that, so they don't
In our
yell
frequently
at us.
asked questions, we're pretty clear that, this is not a donation, this is recycling. So when you put your paper and bottle cans out at the curb, you're not expecting to get some sort of receipt in order to, you don't donate your paper bottles and cans.
Right, but like right now, you can call it Vietnam Vets, for instance, and they give you a tax deduction. So that's what I feel like this is kind of competing with. And so I just want to make sure people know that so they don't get mad at us or for promoting it, because I think it's a really good thing and I'm supporting it.
Okay. I think what we're looking for is just whether we want to make this service clear to residents and invite Curb My Clutter into Princeton. So it seems like people nodding their heads, more or less. All right.
Yes, good
All
idea.
Right. Well, welcome.
Okay.
And I see Sustainable Princeton is here, so they're a great partner too. And and then we'll sort of figure out next steps offline.
Yeah, so just so you're aware, your solicitor has reviewed the contract. We met some requirements that they had requested. So I think we're probably in a good place now to be able to take the next step. So.
Okay, great. All right, thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we come to comments from the public for items that are not already on the agenda. And I see, Mike, that you've signed up to speak. This is on the agenda later. If you have to leave, you can speak now or you can wait.
Sorry, I thought I signed the one for on the agenda.
Oh, you're right. You did. I forgot we had the two different sheets. Okay, so I'd like to open up public comment if there's anybody who'd like to speak on any items that are not already on the agenda. Seeing no one, I'll close public comment and we'll move on to reports. And the first report tonight is from Councilman David Cohen on where we are with the Princeton Seminary redevelopment project.
Well, I'm not going to really talk about where we are with it, but I will talk about the schedule going into the fall. For those of you who are paying attention may know that we, council, referred the question to the planning board late in the spring, in June, asking the planning board to look at the possibility of expanding the area in need of redevelopment to include the land around the seminary library. Unfortunately, it did not make it onto the planning board agenda due to, over the summer, due to a sort of a sparse meeting schedule over the summer. So that's scheduled to happen in late September. I don't have the exact date, but it'll be, I think, the last Thursday in September, at which point, if the planning board is in favor of examining whether the area should be expanded, they will take that vote, and it will go to the planning consultant to prepare a report, which will come back to the planning board in probably mid-October with the planner's conclusions as to whether the area should be expanded. At that point, we know that the seminary has been doing some design work over the summer and into the fall on the assumption that the area in need of redevelopment would be expanded, so they should be ready to hit the ground running at such time as the planning board makes the decision that that's appropriate. And we would be looking for neighborhood meetings in late October where the seminary's designers would be presenting those design ideas that span the two areas in need of redevelopment. And then once the neighbors have been brought into the loop, the ad hoc committee would restart its formal process in early November, probably have a meeting in the first or second week of November to comment on those plans. And from there, that's as far as we've taken the schedule at this point. Whether, depending on what the reception is to the plans, things could go different ways at that point.
Great. And are there any other reports? Start with Ms. Niedergang.
I'll just give a brief report on the upcoming deer hunt. The animal control officer has established a slightly lower goal than last year. There'll be bow hunting starting in mid-September at various plots throughout town, including the Butler Tract again. And he is also in conversation with the Institute, where apparently there are an enormous number of deer, and they have their own bow hunters, but we suspect maybe not doing a particularly efficient job. The data provided on motor vehicle accidents and dead deer on the road have continued to consistently, a little bit up and down, but primarily heading in the right direction. And the thought is that with another couple of years of a really well-organized and well-done deer hunt, that those numbers will go even further down. And there are certain areas of town where there's still tremendous numbers of deer. And there was also, the mayor mentioned this, I think, in her email newsletter. There was the first confirmed case of rabies of 2019 in town, a rabid raccoon. And the concern about that is that a dog off leash or a cat off leash could have an encounter with a rabid animal, a wild animal. And so there's especially this rabid raccoon was in the area of Mountain Lake. So we're going to try putting up some signs just warning people who may take their dogs to go off leash there, which technically is not allowed, but apparently happens anyway, to be aware of this, because we wouldn't want an animal to have an encounter with a pet to have an encounter with a rabid animal. And that's it for that.
Can I add a suggestion to that the signs say something about licensing your dog, since we're trying to get people to license their dogs.
Yeah, the animal control officer has really been pushing that and been pushing. Most of the animals that are not licensed have been vaccinated, but that's definitely an ongoing discussion about increasing, the license rate among dogs, which we believe is only about 50%. So.
Great, thank you. Mr. Cohen?
Yeah, I just wanted to give one other quick report, which is about the fueling station. We had a meeting maybe a week and a half ago at the Harrison Street Firehouse to test the turning radius of the largest fire truck and see if that's a viable location. And it was interesting. It was challenging, but it does seem that the vehicle can make the maneuver if need be. The next step that we agreed on was that it was important to get some traffic data for the intersection at Nassau and Harrison, because we were trying this at around 8 a.m. and we need about 4 people to direct traffic to allow the fire truck in and out of the site. So it's clear there's a lot of traffic that backs up at that intersection, which might, argue counter to relocating the fueling station to that point. So the same traffic consultant who did the studies at Cherry Hill, where luckily we already have traffic information, is we're looking at extending their contract to take a look at Harrison and Nassau, so that we can make that comparison and help finalize the decision.
Great, thank you. Ms. Carmiller, any reports? Okay. Mr. Williamson, any reports?
None.
Okay. I just had a couple reports. The first is that the tour bus system is now, the upgraded tour bus system is now in place. So tour buses, as they were before, are only allowed to pick up and drop off passengers on the bus stops on Nassau Street, and then they're supposed to go down and park on Alexander, sort of across from where the Dinky station is. And there are special tour bus meters down there that are $20 an hour, which is the rate that is comparable to other cities that have tour bus programs. And so, we're trying it out for now. So far, I haven't heard much one way or the other. So, hopefully it's working, and we can probably get a report on it from the chief next time he's back here. And also, for about a month now, Access Princeton has been operating the smart card transfer program. And those sessions, I've gone to a couple of them. There's a steady stream of people who've come in, and those seem to be working pretty smoothly as well. And some people come in with pretty large amounts on their smart card. So, I'm glad we're offering the program so people are able to still take advantage of that money that they've put on. And are there any staff reports? Mr. Shield?
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to update council from the last meeting where we discussed the biodigester. I've been in contact with the vendor. They've moved the biodigester from the MetLife facility to the facility in Elizabeth, where they're going to begin the repairs of it. We will be back to council at the second meeting in September with a presentation, review some of the options and the things that we discussed at the last meeting.
Mr. Cohen?
Eve just reminded me of another, it's sort of an announcement rather than a report, but I want to squeeze it in here. We're offering some education on using the parking technology at the Senior Resource Center. It's scheduled for September 20th at noon. We've actually had a really robust response from council with a lot of people willing to help teach. And so I'm actually thinking about going back to the Senior Resource Center and seeing if we can identify a second day, because I don't want the teachers to outnumber the students. And I'm sure it'll be more convenient also for members of the Senior Resource Center to be able to have a couple of times to choose from. So stay tuned on that. But I think originally we had talked about the 20th or the 25th, so I'll see if the 25th is also still viable, and I'll let you all know.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, now we'll move on to correspondence, and we received a request from the Turn the Town Teal campaign, and this is a group trying to raise awareness for ovarian cancer by tying teal ribbons around street trees, and just wanted to make sure that there was support from council to have this campaign come into town. So, yeah, Ms. Krummeler?
I support it, but I just want to, just say that probably we would want to check every year and don't assume that we're doing it now that we'll always do it. Just because we would have to think twice if this is a great idea, and a lot of times great ideas go spread, and we just want to. I just want to make sure.
I think having a check-in is a good idea.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Can I
that makes sense.
just ask a quick question?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I saw you
Do
were
wanna
there.
confirm?
So,
Good morning.
1 second. Let Mr. Cohen speak, and then
Sure.
you can say something.
Okay.
so my question, it's just out of curiosity, the Teal Tea Foundation, what's the story behind? I mean, does tea have something to do with this project, or?
Okay, so first let me introduce myself. My name is Chen Tong Chen, and I'm the VP of the social media of TRT Foundation. So I joined the foundation recently. But based on my knowledge, so we are entering our 7th year, and our funder and executive manager is ovarian cancer survivor. And actually, a lot of our officers and people on our trustee and director of advisory directors, they are either survivors or caregivers. So we choose teal because teal is a color represents ovarian cancer, just like pink represents breast cancer. And tea, I think maybe because it's related to a lot of events we're holding over the years. We have a lot of events related to tea, like something similar to Tea Party, because it's like a disease only women will get, and we try to hold activities that will attract like women and make them feel, comfortable and so they can participate better. I guess that's the story, but I will confirm it with the funder later. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right. It sounds like there's support for 1 year.
Okay,
So thank
thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, and next we come to our public hearings. The first one is Ordinance 2019-31, an ordinance by the Municipality of Princeton pursuant to NJSA 40A-12-1, authorizing a license agreement for Block 2702, Lot 76, Princeton Tax Map with Witherspoon Urban Renewal Associates LLC to permit the installation of an emergency generator, cooking oil receptacle, and CO2 receptacle enclosure on the Heinz Plaza. And I just want to start to see if there's any questions from council before we open up the public hearing. All right, I'd like to open up the public hearing on this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Niedergang and seconded by Ms. Krummeler. And if there's no further discussion, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
And the ordinance passes unanimously. Next, we come to Ordinance 2019-33, an ordinance of the Municipality of Princeton authorizing the establishment of Government Energy Aggregation Program. And again, are there any questions from council before we open up the public hearing? All right, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. Is there anybody who'd like to speak to it? All right, seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council.
I'll move it.
Second.
Okay, it's moved by Ms. Krummeler and seconded by Ms. Niedergang, and Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Cramiller,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
So the ordinance has been approved, and again, I see Christine Symington in the here with us tonight. So look forward to continuing to work with you on this, and hopefully we get a good price when we go out. Okay. Next is Ordinance 2019-34, an ordinance by Princeton authorizing a license agreement for Block 4702, Lot 18, Princeton tax map pursuant to NJSA 40A12-1, which is 6-8 Charlton Street. And this is for a staircase that encroaches onto the sidewalk. And if there are no questions from council, I'd like to open up the public hearing for this ordinance. And seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to council. Is there any
I'll move it.
discussion? Or it's been moved by Mr. Cohen?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Kremiller. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Cramiller,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
All right, and that ordinance has also been approved unanimously. And next we come to the ordinance introduction for this evening, Ordinance 2019-35 of the Mayor and Council of Princeton concerning salaries and compensation of certain personnel of the municipality of Princeton. And Mr. DeShield, do you just want to explain this ordinance and why it's coming before us tonight?
Yes. The ordinance before you is amendments to the salary ordinance based on the COLA adjustment approved by the Personnel Committee of 1.75% for the personnel. Once we establish the COLA for the year, we review the ordinance to see if any adjustments need to be made. And as you can see, there's some slight adjustments on Class 4. We also made some corrections on some titles, adding the systems analyst, correcting the construction project engineer, and adding the engineering inspector.
Great. Are there any additional questions for Mr. DeShield, or is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Kremiller and seconded by Mr. Cohen. And Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Niedergang,
Yes.
Mr. Cohen,
Yes.
Ms. Cramiller,
Yes.
Mr. Williamson.
Yes.
So the ordinance has been introduced, and there will be a public hearing on September 9th, 2019. And next we come to our resolutions for this evening. The first is 19-261, resolution authorizing a professional services agreement with Dewberry Engineers Incorporated in the not-to-exceed amount of $81,640 for the creation of a base map of Witherspoon Street from Nassau Street to Valley Road. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Kremiller,
Second.
seconded by Mr. Cohen. Any discussion?
I just had a quick,
After you.
question. There was some language in the request for proposal that talked about design, and I just wanted to verify. My understanding is this is not for design at all. It's just to create a map of existing conditions.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. So I was very excited to see that this work is going on. I was not aware of it previously. I know there's a grant of $610,000, and we're allocating a small percentage of that. Do we have any idea what the work on Witherspoon Street what the cost would be, or what the timeline would be? It looks like that the survey process, having read it, is not going to start, it probably won't be done for about 6 months or mid-January or something like that.
I don't know the schedule. However, in order to get that, one thing we have to do first is they need to determine what the conditions are so they can
Right.
really create a project and a construction schedule. I don't know it at this point. I can find out from the engineer.
Okay. But there will be public input once the survey is done to determine.
Actually,
What-
there's always a phase of every street project we have where we do have the public involved in the process. at that phase, as usual, we will.
Right. I'd just like to make sure that this is the broader public and not just those living in a narrowly defined area, because this is really the heart of the town, and I think many people will want to weigh in. I also have two small points to make. I don't know how this information is presented to us, but can it be presented to us in a way that it can be incorporated with the GIS systems that engineering already has, so that it will be useful in the future and not a one-time delivery? Am I being clear?
No, I'm not really understanding.
Okay. So I mean, I guess I'm asking for the equivalent of, rather than have the information being delivered on paper, having the information being delivered in a way that, as we move towards a more comprehensive GIS system, that this information can be fed into it, and it will become kind of part of a permanent database that we have. I'm not a tech person, so Jenny, you're nodding like you understand what I'm saying.
I think maybe the bigger question is, if when the street gets improved, that's the part we also want to make sure gets into this system, right?
But this is all the underlying stuff, like where the cellars are, where the
Right.
sewer is, where the trolley tracks is. I'd hate for it to be created and then not be in a form where it can be incorporated. So I don't know if that's being.
In most cases, a lot of this
Let's
stuff
think
is.
ahead to
Yeah,
possible
to-
incorporation in the
yes,
future. So whatever we do
yes.
today, make sure it's compatible to what.
Yes.
Right.
What I was
we
going to say
need
is
in the
most of the
future.
stuff is in electronic format that we do get today. It's a matter of later integrating it in. I don't know at what level of detail. We'd have to sit down with the engineer and see.
Yeah, my sense from the engineering department is that virtually everything that they're doing these days is required to be compatible with our GIS software.
Okay, that's
So
good.
I mean, it's a great thing to make sure of,
Yeah,
but I think it's
yeah.
default.
That's great to know. And then I have just a very, very small point, but in part 7A of the resolution, it uses the term, I think, man hours or something like that. And I just would like to see us move, more, very consistently towards gender neutral pronouns. I didn't read it so carefully that I could swear that was the only mention, but if we could change that to person hours and just, be on alert for that. Thank you.
Good point.
Did you want to amend the resolution to
Sure.
do that?
Let's amend the resolution.
I'll second that amendment.
Okay, and can you be more specific where that mention is?
I'm sorry, I took notes. It's part 7A of the resolution. Let me pull it up on the,
Well, I think we can just say any mention of man hours is changed to a gender-neutral term such as person hours.
Okay. So that motion was made by Ms. Niedergang, seconded by Ms. Krummeler. Write your name for a second. All in favor?
Aye.
aye.
Any opposed? Okay. The resolution passes. And next we come to 19262, resolution authorizing the award of a contract to Central Jersey Equipment LLC, vendor for Deere and Company, using Middlesex County Educational Services Commission of New Jersey contract number ESCNJ 18/19-25 for a John Deere, I'm not sure exactly how to, I'm just going to read the letters, XUV 825M, multi-purpose maintenance cart with snowplow attachment in the amount of $25,899.35 for use by the Recreation Department. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Ms. Krummeler.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Niedergang. Any questions on this one? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and now we come to the consent agenda, which contains items of a routine nature passed by a single vote. I would like to pull item 19265 because I think there's some people here who may want to speak to it. And are there any other items anybody would like removed from the consent agenda. All right, so let's take up 19265, resolution authorizing agreement to contribute to acquisition of land for conservation and recreation purposes, 394 Ridgeview Road. And
Mayor, I need to recuse for this, so
Okay.
I will leave the room.
okay, thank you. Is there a motion to approve, just so we get it on the table?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen. Is there a second?
Seconded.
Seconded by Mr. Williamson. And Mike Pizarro has put his name down to speak to this. I'd like to call it Mike.
Good evening. My name is Mike Pissarro. I'm the Policy Director for the Watershed Institute. I'll just keep it very brief. I want to thank the council here for taking this action. The council has been very great over the last year or so that we sat down and talked about this issue. The community has been amazing coming together to make this happen in order to protect, while a small parcel, very important parcel to protect the headwaters of Mountain Brook and the Stony Brook. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity and your support.
Great. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak to the resolution? All right, I'll bring it back to council then. Ms. Krummeler?
I just want to let everyone know that I'm going to vote no, and I have spoken to other members of the council about this, and I've had meetings, and I think it's not unexpected, but I feel it's not a good use of public money, not just ours, but other open space money. It's a large portion of it's already protected by wetlands protection, and it's so I'm not going to vote for it.
All right, is there anybody else who'd like to speak?
I'm just concerned with Ms. Niedergang recusing. Do we have a quorum, or can we act on this?
Yes, you have a quorum. The mayor and 3 council people is a quorum, but you also had a quorum when Ms. Niedergang was here. On this particular resolution, it's a majority of those who can vote, and the only time the mayor would vote is if there's a tie.
Okay.
So the 3 council people who are not, recused and eligible to vote can vote on the resolution, and 2 votes will pass it.
Not only did you answer the question I asked, but you answered the question I meant to ask. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other discussion?
I had a question. I know we had discussed it before. We said we're agreement to contribute, and I remember some discussion about dollar amounts, but I don't see an actual dollar amount that was decided upon. So
Yeah, it's in the resolution
This-
here.
I
It's
must
under
have
the
missed it.
second, it should have been on the, it probably should have been on the resolution title, but it's in the resolution itself, so it's $50,000.
Okay. I just want to make sure it jives with what I had thought would be reasonable. And I did share some of Jenny's concerns, or I should say Council President Crumiller's concerns. On the dance, I'll call you Council President. Anyway, but I just think the good of protecting those headways outweighed the value is there for the environmental good, and that's why I'm voting for it.
And I know it seems like we have a skeletal crew up here, and in large part that's because it's August. We have discussed this acquisition in executive session, and although we didn't take a formal vote there, I think I would like to report that the 2 council members who aren't here expressed support for this acquisition. So it'd be nice if they were here tonight, but it's, it is what it is in terms of this is a popular vacation time. So with that, let's take a vote. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And any opposed? Okay. Or nay. I think you say nay. Okay.
Nay.
So the resolution passes 2-1. So, yeah, Congratulations, and we'll be in touch about next steps. Okay. Welcome back, Ms. Niedergang. And now we'll move on to the full consent agenda. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Cohen,
Second.
and seconded by Mr. Williamson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, consent agenda passes unanimously. And is there a motion to move back into closed session?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. We're moving into closed session now, so we're sticking around. Probably. Do you have a quick question?
I must have read it and forgot. That's it. Okay, so wait, what was the other again?
Quick one? Yeah.
Can I ask an additional question? Just can we tie ring bones on the tree outside the yard, like in the council yard?
I think that was in the spirit of what was described in the
trees, right? What did she say?
the tree. You wanted to try
Just
one
outside the yard?
at the municipal complex.
Yeah. Is that okay?
I think
Okay.
that's-
And you're taking them all down, right?
Yes, I will make sure everything will be in shape. I will drive regularly around and check, make sure everything looks great shape, and I will take them off myself. Yeah. Thank you for your support.
Thank you.
Three cheers for direct democracy, right?
Yeah, right? Like, what?